June the 2nd, 2025. Guys, you're looking at the 7-day forecast from the National Hurricane Center, and we have a 10% chance of a cyclone formation just off the southeast coast. And if you look at the satellite imaging now, the radar, which we will do after this, you'll see there's storms that are blowing across the U.S. and out into the Atlantic in this area. Plus, you've got a lot of wildfire smoke blowing down from Canada. It's got us in a haze here in Mississippi, and it's not healthy. And we're still in a geomagnetic storm. The shields have been open for over 13 hours. Now we're down from the it was almost 2.5 million mile per hour winds as far as solar winds, back down into around 900,000, something like that, in the 500 kilometers per second range. That's leveling off some, and it's still high, but the opening in the shields is not good, especially if you can feel it in your heart. So be very careful with that. What they're saying, again, 10% chance, a non-tropical area of low pressure is forecast to form near or offshore of the southeastern U.S. coast during the next couple of days. If the system remains offshore, the low could gradually develop some subtropical or tropical characteristics later this week while moving northwestward, or northeastward, at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Now, we're going to look at satellite images, and you'll see what they're looking at. Now, we're also going to see, again, a lot of wildfire smoke coming down and headed straight out, caught up in this front that's moving off, and also some Saharan dust. And that's going to inhibit formation out into the Atlantic because that dry air absorbs moisture. And this is what they're looking at. Florida, you've been seeing these storms move across you all day. Down Tampa, now it's starting to move a little further south. But this morning, Tampa, you look like you were getting some pretty good rain there. But here's what they're watching. That circle you were seeing was just off the coast here of Georgia, North Florida, South and North Carolina. And so this is what they're watching now. This is what we talked about, usually in this area, Caribbean or the Gulf of America, or right in this area. And all of this moisture is coming out of the Gulf itself. That's usually where they were formed. Now I'm going to put this back to regular satellite imaging, show you a couple of other things. Now, it's not as thick as it was this morning, but that's kind of a visual effect because you see these pop-up cloud covers from all the humidity here. It is 12:52 p.m. Central Time, 84 degrees, 72% humidity, feels like 94. So, again, that heat factor is there. So stay in the shade, stay out of the sun. And really, it's not safe to breathe a lot of this smoke coming in. But you can see it coming down out of Canada. Not as thick as it was yesterday, but you've got some wind moving across here that dissipates that. It's still all in the atmosphere moving through large parts of the country. And you can see it moving straight offshore. And that's what's pushing the moisture out across Florida now into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, yesterday I mentioned, you see the smoke right here, that it was going to move up and across Long Island and through this area, and that's exactly what it's done. And it's really still, if you look through here, and you can see it trailing down. Just not good to breathe. It's really thick right in this area along Lake Michigan. Check that out. More coming. Trudeau, you and Justin Trudeau, you and Gavin Newsom, as Trump calls him, y'all need to do something about your fires. I mean, you're polluting the whole North American continent. Okay? Get it together, guys. But let's look at the wide view. Now, looking out over the Atlantic, you can see the convergence zone is starting to form. It's that time of the year. Here's the Cabo Verde Islands. But what you're seeing is an outpush of a lot of dust. You can see it in the clouds there, and if you look how hazy it is there, and guys, really look right along this area. See it? That's Saharan sand. You can see the sun moving across the equator here. Check that out. Here's your smoke there. But, well, again, this is going to be the problems. Africa still is not kicking them off. That usually doesn't get started this time of the year. And again, this Saharan sand layer, guys, definitely inhibits the storms. We'll see that all summer off and on. And what will usually happen, we'll see a couple storms form back to back, maybe 2 or 3 crossing the Atlantic, headed this way. And one will come in here and absorb a lot of that sand and it's the fall guy, right? I mean, he takes it for the team and absorbs a lot of that dust, and then another one will pull right in there behind it and start to strengthen very quickly. But again, we're June 2nd. We're into the season until the end of November. Now let's take a look at space weather just a moment. Notice solar wind speed is not 1100 and plus miles per hour, but 568 is still high. The density is not that bad because the solar wind is high. But let's look at the satellite. We'll do that and look at the numbers on it. What they're saying is the storm is subsiding, but it's not over. As predicted, a halo CME struck Earth on June 1st, sparking a severe G4 geomagnetic storm. It was one of the biggest space weather events of solar cycle 25. The storm is subsiding now, but it's not over. Minor G1 to strong G3 storms remain possible today as Earth's magnetosphere reverberates from the significant blow. Now, also, they're talking about widespread auroras. Let's take a look at the Discover satellite information. Now, look at the opening in the shields, guys. Let me see. See what I've got this one day. All right, so these are hours. See these blocks? So if we just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, nearly 15 hours of our shields completely open. Look at that. When the red line is down here, and look at the numbers as I do that. See the 12 and the 11s running up here? So there's a 21-degree gap, or point gap there in our shields as we speak. When you see the red line encompassed in this purple hue, that's open shields. So guys, if you have problems with your heart or an aneurysm or something like that, be very careful, because I got hit hard, really hard today. And I have an aneurysm, and it was scary. So and I've been out very limited, but it doesn't matter if you're inside or outside when the shields are open this wide. Now you can see we were coming off of very high solar winds, and this is just one day, but again, yesterday we were hitting 1125, things like that, 2.5 million miles per hour. Now this chart normally is not this high. You'll see it start around 300, but because of the elevated speed, they had to bump the chart up. And so 320 is about our average, and that's not even showing here. So we're down in 568, something like that. Still, you're over 500,000 miles per hour there, and with the shields open like we're seeing at the top, it's not good. Now, SolarHam is the other link right under spaceweather.com that's on our website on the left at bpearthwatch.com. Guys have been there for a long time. We rely on their information. We also use a lot of the instruments that you see here that they're using. You've seen at the SDO and those links like that. You can see that the calm kind of ended right there. We had a very strong M flare, didn't get into that red X flare line, but there's still chances for it. And notice at the top, moderate G2 to strong G3 magnetic storms. Conditions remain in the forecast for the next 24 hours. And this is the 3-day geomagnetic forecast. Today, G3 is anticipated, tomorrow a G2, then clearing up by June the 4th. They said that on the last time, and this is not accounting for whatever this flare is going to do. In other words, this was earlier, and this has happened since that point. We'll see if they're tracking this in the CME yet. And they're not, guys. I checked over there. There's no new tracking at all for any of the CMEs. There were a couple other even the other day, and I think that's why we're still seeing some pressure. We have a 15% chance of more X flares, M flares, 65, C flares, 99. But the proton event, guys, those can be the strongest. Could be a number of things, but it's still 50%. See that? Now our sunspots are down from being beta, gamma, alpha, or BGA. The two ones we're concerned about, the big one, 4100, and the smaller 4099, that's just under it. They're no longer growing. That's the difference we're seeing. They're not as magnetically complicated, and they are not growing. They're stable. Also, the flare that you're seeing right here, guys, was an M3.3 from AR 4100. That's the large sunspot right there that they're saying is stable. Doesn't mean they won't throw out flares. It's just not growing, and it's not, again, triple configured as far as its magnetics. And taking a look at the last 2 days of the sun, this is the SDO Teal camera, the 131, and you'll see that right there, guys, that was the flare that we just had from that large sunspot. Now, it's still crackling with these smaller flares, just not quite as intense. It's stabilized, it's not growing, but this is a coronal opening. So what we're seeing here, a flare here, or sunspot here, this sunspot's had a few, and as this one's moving around, we'll see some solar wind increase from this dark area called a coronal hole. But then we've got a group of sunspots coming around here that we really don't know much about yet. There's some activity here, and look at that filament right in this area will start to rise. Watch that. Those are thousands of kilometers long. Look at that right there. So that's the activity that's coming. Now, since they're not tracking it, let's take a look at a different satellite. It's still Earth-facing. This is the SOHO, and you're going to see a couple things here. Note, of course, the occulter disk is blocking the sun so we can see what's going on around the edges. There goes Mercury rising. You're going to see the G4 halo right there. Now, we're at, notice your timestamp, 31st. Getting to yesterday on the 1st. Now notice all the sparkling at that point. Those are energized particles approaching the satellite from that halo burst. But again, we'll let it go through. I was talking, and you're going to see this quadrant light up, vast explosions on the M flare that we just looked at over on the SDO satellite. Here's 6-1. There it is, right there. All of that was that flare. So we definitely need to pay attention because it was Earth-facing. We're just seeing the side blow, but it was an Earth-facing flare, and more than likely that did throw some type of CME out. So we just have to you have to kind of come back and check the modeling on it and see if they add it in later today. Maybe they will. We'll see. What they do is they get the information from the satellites. That's how they know how fast it's traveling. They measure the intensity, the speed, the density, all of that. Again, you see that sparkling. That is how long it took the Halo CME to reach this satellite. And these are usually around 1 million miles from our planet. And then you've got only 92 million miles on the other side to the sun. But that's what you're seeing when we see this effect. Now, I want to talk about something just a little bit different, and it has to do with the drone attack on Russia. Now, they all showed up in Turkey today, up in Istanbul, I think it was, and the meeting didn't last but about an hour, and it was delayed a little bit. But Russia walked in with their version of a ceasefire peace treaty, and we're going to look at that, but it was more like an ultimatum, because you're about to get your butt kicked for throwing all those drones in there. Now, Russia's kind of hit back a little bit. The only thing they agreed on, I think, was a 6,000-man prisoner swap and a lot of bodies and things like that. But what it's saying is the Russian and Ukrainian delegation didn't have a whole lot to talk about in Monday's Istanbul meeting. Apparently, given it only lasted for about an hour, but they did reach an agreement for another major prisoner swap. Bloomberg and international outlets report that the warring sides agreed to a second swap involving 1,000 POWs, which to include sick and heavily wounded prisoners as well as young soldiers under 25 years of age. There was also an agreement for the exchange of 6,000 bodies of fallen soldiers. As part of this, Russia proposed a 2 to 3 day ceasefire for the evacuation of the war dead, to which the Ukrainian delegation responded by demanding an unconditional truce, which has remained a non-starter for Moscow. Guys, they're not going to put up with people like Lindsey Graham and Dick, Da Nang Dick, coming in and pushing Ukraine back into Russian territory. That was all Russian at one time. And like I said, there's interest here for these American rhinos, both in big pharma and in military, right? So that's what they're doing, and they know they get rich while they lead to bloodlust. That's what they're doing. They're demons. So you see, again, I'm not going to go back into that video where Graham and they went over there and pumped him up. And what they did was expose kind of one of his last measures of attack. They said it took a year to plan that. And we know where most of the help probably came from during the beginning of that year that it took, right? Anyway, the Russian delegation handed over peace proposals that include Kiev surrendering control of territory it still holds in 4 partially occupied regions, a Ukrainian official said. The Russian side has made clear that the complete withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the annexed territories is central to establishing a lasting ceasefire. And what brought Russia in, one of the things was these annexed territories up in the northern section or northeastern section of Ukraine. Ukraine was still bombarding them. I mean, innocent civilians, I guess, trying to run out any more Russian sympathizers. And that's been going on for several years, about 12, I think, or maybe more. And they just wouldn't quit it. But the whole time that was happening, biolabs were coming up, a bunch of them, way more than you're being told, and other nefarious things popping up as the playground, the 51st state of the deep state, of the U.S. deep state. Lindsey McCain's not with us, no name and all that, but all of that played into this. Now, Russia had this drafted yesterday before they got there today. This is Section 1, and it's very similar to Section 2, and this is key parameters for a definite settlement. And they're talking about neutrality of Ukraine. You can't join NATO. You can't be bringing in bombs, and you can't join any of these European countries that want to, again, use you as a playground. And that's all it was, a very dangerous and very diabolical playground at that. But what we're going to do is go down to Section 2, but you can read the whole thing because really Section 2 is a repeat of Section 1 in a lot of ways. But the ceasefire conditions, it says Option 1, commencement of complete withdrawal of the AFU and other Ukrainian paramilitary formations from the territory of the Russian Federation, including the DPR, LPR, Zaporizhia, and the Kherson regions, and their pullback from the borders of the Russian Federation to a distance agreed upon by the parties in accordance with provisions to be approved. Now, Option 2 is prohibition on redeployment of the AFU and other Ukrainian paramilitary formations. In other words, once we do this, you're not reforming your Nazi soldiers. You're not going to do it, except for movements aimed at withdrawal from the borders of the Russian Federation to a distance agreed on by the parties. And I don't know what the puppet Z-Man will do after he talks with the U.S. again, but they're going to try to buck this pretty heavily. And Russia has no give at all on this, and now they're really hot about the drone strikes. I think they did a couple drone strikes their own since then. Nothing really major, but what they're doing is the pot is boiling. And so you did that. We know Lindsey Graham was there. They're talking about that now, a day after we did, in 2 days. Other news sites around the world and agencies are starting to talk about the Lindsey Graham visit before all of this happened. They're tying it together. But again, this is an ultimatum, and you're about to get your butt kicked. And here's what's amazing to me, is Trump has been silent. Remember, Graham said that that Trump wasn't getting the job done, so he was going to use Congress and go around Trump to get more military aid in there for. To what? You done lost 1 million people, Lindsey Graham, over there in that area. Your bloodlust is not satisfied. Your day will come, and you know when it will be. and you've sold your soul to Satan, and so you're not going to enjoy that day very good. Anyway, cessation of mobilization and commencement of demobilization, and this prohibition of redeployment and all, they're talking about giving 30 days to draw everything down. You can keep your military there as far as they can go in and help move your armaments back or whatever you're going to withdraw. That's the only reason you can have them. And after that period, you disband all of that, except for, I guess, your maybe National Guard or whatever, but that has to stop. No more foreign supplies of military products and foreign military assistance to Ukraine, including the provision of satellite communication services and intelligence data. He's talking to Elon there. Putin is. Anyway, elimination of military presence of third countries on Ukrainian territory. What third countries? Guess. Stopping a participation of foreign specialists in military operation on Ukraine's side. Like I said, this is a no-holds-barred ultimatum. No giving. And why are they doing it? Lindsey Graham went over there and stirred up World War III. Guarantees of Ukraine's renunciation of sabotage and subversive activities against the Russian Federation and its citizens. They're calling it terrorist attacks, but we know what it is. It says the establishment of a bilateral center for monitoring and control of the ceasefire regime, mutual amnesty for political prisoners and release of detained civilians, lifting of martial law in Ukraine. In other words, Zelensky's taken full advantage of martial law, so no elections, right? Announcement of the date for elections of the president of Ukraine and the Verkhovna Rada, which must take place no later than 100 days after the lifting of martial law. Signing of an agreement on the implementation of provisions contained in Section 1. Again, you can read it, but it's kind of this. In other words, you're going to do what we say, and that's going to be shrink down to almost nothing and keep your head down. Now, you can tell they took a little time with this because this is the sequence of the steps and timeline for this implementation, guys. Section 3. Work commences on drafting the treaty text. A 2 to 3 day ceasefire is declared for the collection of bodies of the fallen in the gray zone. 6,000 bodies of AFU servicemen are unilaterally transferred to the AFU, which is Ukraine. A ceasefire memorandum is signed with specific dates for fulfillment for all provisions, determining the date for signing the future treaty on final settlement, hereafter called the treaty. A 30-day ceasefire regime takes effect from the moment the AFU withdrawal begins. 30 days. Complete withdrawal of all the AFU units from the territory of the Russian Federation and full implementation of the package agreement must be completed within those 30 days. Elections are conducted and government bodies are formed on the territory of Ukraine. The signed treaty is endorsed by a legally binding UN Secretary Council resolution, and the treaty is ratified, enforced, and implemented. Now, one good thing, Poland yesterday elected a right-wing candidate, someone that's not libtarded. It was very close. It was neck and neck on going full libtard or Trump's wasn't his nomination, but that's who he was backing. The right-wing guy cleared it, and Poland, and that's very important because Poland is very important to this entire area. Now, I don't know how they will end up going with it, but it's better to have someone with some sense in Poland than a warmonger. And I don't think that's what we got. We'll see. Now, the but of this article is, but at this moment, the Zelensky government is feeling more emboldened than ever after Sunday's Operation Spiderweb, which saw suicide drones released from near at least 5 Russian air bases, resulting in devastating damage and destruction to Russian strategic bombers and other valuable aircraft. Zelensky and his more hawkish backers in Europe had nothing to do with this. They're going to mention the U.S., I'm sure, before it's all said and done. Anyway, Zelensky and his hawkish backers in Europe will likely issue a quick note, especially on the demand for troop withdrawal and holding new presidential and parliamentary elections, and the war goes on, right? That's the war hawks. Really, the war devils. It's an insult to the beautiful hawks of this planet to call them that. Now, listen to what Puppet Man says. Zelensky has hailed the major Sunday attacks as an absolutely brilliant, and that the planning for the operation had been in the works for a year and a half. Ukraine is defending itself, and rightly so, he said. We're doing everything to make Russia feel the need to end the war. Guys, Russia's going to end it, just not the way that they would want it to. The White House, and this is important, the White House is still yet to make a definite statement or definitive statement, and weekend reports said that Kiev hid its planning from Washington. Well, not all of Washington. You saw a couple of them there. Thank you, Dick and Lindsay. However, many analysts expressed doubt over this claim. President Trump, if he embraces or hails the operation too enthusiastically, might derail efforts at improved bilateral relations with Russia. Any statement seen as giving a U.S. blessing might also serve to thwart ongoing ceasefire attempts. Again, it's been a couple of days. We've heard a lot of information coming out. Now, I may be wrong, but when I began the video, there had been no White House press conference or anything like that. What is it? We really don't know there. And if we know Trump at all, a little, you know how he is. He's very prideful about him being in charge, right? He wants everything his way, and he wants his name stamped on it that he did it. Well, so far that hasn't happened. It would be interesting. What I would love to see is for him to send U.S. Marshals or someone in there and get those two out of these two, a Rhino and a Democrat, and charge them, try them for betraying the country and possibly the world if it leads to World War III. That's what he needs to do. Now, I don't know if he'll go that far, but he definitely needs to censor them, reprimand them, and get them voted out. Elections are coming up for the Rhinos real soon. Now, I'm going to link another article. I'm not going to read it all out, but this is a picture of that meeting this morning, and Zelensky opens the peace talks with Russia by gloating about Sunday's bomber attack deep inside Russia and begging the West for more weapons. That's what it was all about, keeping the war going, but they may have poked the bear too much. And Russia rightly, I don't care what anybody says, Ukraine was in the wrong. It was a U.S. proxy state building bioweapons, and a lot of it had to do with probably the epidemic or pandemic that we just went through when it's all said and done. But Russia knew they were also more than likely producing biological weapons. So, and you can't have a punk like Zelensky sitting there throwing bombs and drones at you and bombing the 4 districts that we were talking about. And so I'm pro-Russia on the deal. If you don't like it, I don't care, because I see through this, and most of you do too, but there's always going to be people that say, well, he's being too rough on them. They started it, and they went on a dozen years bombing those districts that were mostly Russian, and they wouldn't stop. They said, well, no, we've got Obama behind us. We got George Bush behind us, and all of that. Well, you don't have that now, but Lindsey Graham wanted to make sure you thought you did. We'll see how that works out. To me, that's going to be the most interesting play going forward with this entire project. Other things are happening. Get a little time this afternoon. We'll talk about those. But right now, guys, we're watching it. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.